Arga Abilion was once called the bottom of the barrel. However, he would no longer be stuck in that position. The day he realized his innate ability, he stopped being human. Arga walked into the guild and found that it had a long line again. He quietly fell in line until a tall and buff man stepped before him. Arga called him out, telling him not to cut the line. Just then the man acted surprised, reasoning that Arga was too small that he didn't even see him. Arga gritted his teeth in anger, reminding the man to get back in line. Furious, the man asked if he was giving him orders, then proudly proclaimed that he was a B-rank adventurer. He degraded Arga, shaming him for being an E-rank bottom-feeder Tamer. Helpless, Arga didn't fight back, making the man satisfied. He then cockily called Arga a weakling shrimp, telling him to know his place. Suddenly, the guildmaster appeared, placing his gigantic hand on top of the buff man's head. He tauntingly told the buff man that cutting in line wasn't acceptable, making him stutter. He was flexing his B rank, then got held like a cantaloupe. The guildmaster reminded him that not knowing his place could result in demotion. The man quickly apologized, then ran as quickly as he could. Arga promptly thanked Namira, the guildmaster. Namira then instructed Arga to report similar incidents to the staff whenever they happened again. Arga sighed, saying that it was fine because he had free time anyway. Namira was surprised, but their conversation was cut short when the guild's attendant called him over. Arga stepped forward and told the attendant that he was there to report leaving Kanado's party, much to Namira's shock. Arga got nervous, and he told Namira that he could probably guess the reason. As expected, Kanado banished him. This all happened 3 hours ago, and Arga was beyond confused. He couldn't believe Kanado, and he asked what he did to deserve such a punishment. One of Kanado's girls told him his ears and head were both bad, and it was because he was a tamer. They didn't need him, believing that tamers could only befriend monsters. Arga frantically asked what was wrong with being a tamer, so Kanado taught him. He then angrily yelled that tamers grow too slowly. Another one of Kanado's girls added that tamers share experience points with their monster companions. And Arga was the only one in the party who was still in E rank. Without monsters, he was just a weakling. Arga then reminded Kanado that they already discussed this when he joined, and he recalled how Kanado said it was alright. However, Kanado bluntly said that was 2 years ago. Arga agreed, and he made him understand how they had been companions throughout those 2 years. Kanado frowned at the term, as Arga was just someone who dragged down the entire party. That person shouldn't be called a companion, but a dead weight. Together, Kanado and his girls hysterically laughed at him. Thanks to that, Arga now had a lot of free time. Hearing everything that happened, Namira and the guild attendant could barely say anything. The attendant then reassured Arga that she would update his card registration information, which hadn't been updated in 2 years. Arga asked if he should update it since he had plenty of time now that he was banished. Seeing his persistence, the attendant presented him with a crystal ball. Arga asked what it was, and the attendant explained that it was a recently introduced status checker. It could read his status using a crystal. Previously, it was done through written applications, but unfortunately, many people would falsify them. Arga touched the crystal, amazed that it could tell such information. Just then, the attendant told him that the information read would be transferred to his card. With that, she peered into the crystal, searching for Arga Abilion, an 18-year-old human on rank E. Shortly after, Arga found that his occupation was a tamer and fusionist. He insisted the crystal was broken as he didn't know anything about being a fusionist. Hearing that, the attendant argued that the crystal was absolutely accurate. Meanwhile, Namira grew curious, wondering if something he was speculating was possible. Occupational skills were composed of tame, companion, art, and the mix fusion art. There was no mistake, Arga had a second occupation. Arga seemed confused, so Namira explained that normally each person could only have one. However, on rare occasions, there are those who possess 2 occupations. Before Namira could even define it, Arga suddenly intervened, excitedly saying that 2 occupations would be advantageous for job changes. Namira was unimpressed, reminding Arga that it was not that level of discussion. The occurrence of a second job was statistically 1 in 1,000 years. Arga was shocked as he claimed that he was a prodigy. He then questioned if this was a complete role reversal. Just then, the guild attendant asked what a fusionist was, but Namira hadn't heard of it either. Judging from the name, it was likely an occupation that could crossbreed monsters. Arga was disappointed to hear this, as this was something that any tamer could do. He admitted that he got his hopes up when Namira said this phenomenon happened once in 1,000 years. Namira and the attendant were in shock, unable to believe that anyone could do what he claimed. Arga was now confused, asking if they could also do it. Later that day, Arga headed to the forest, summoning all the nearby monsters through his status window. Not long after, different breeds of monsters appeared before him. Arga was pleased, and he informed the monsters that they would be the base for the day's fusion. He then opened the status window, evaluating each monster before him. The slime was at level 15 and had an attack power of 11. The baby wolf was at level 10 with an attack power of 2, and the baby dragon was at level 10 with an attack power of 3 and a defense of 1. Truly, everyone still had terrible stats. Arga started with Lala, the baby dragon. He checked his screen and decided to fuse her with a bat. He had been doing this so naturally, and it turned out that a tamer's ability was only to command monsters. He remembered Namira telling him this, and the man said that tamers couldn't crossbreed monsters to create new ones. Back at the guild, the attendant asked Arga about how he got the misconception that any tamer could do what he was capable of. Arga grew tense, admitting that he didn't go to school and was self-taught. He didn't know any other tamers either. The attendant agreed, adding that he didn't have friends and was also banished. She didn't rub salt in the wound, she exfoliated it with Himalayan rocks. Arga couldn't argue now that his sad reality had been exposed. Arga snapped back into reality, telling himself to get back on track and do some fusion. As he stared at the screen that awaited his confirmation, he told himself that he was a fusionist. To make himself sound cooler, he decided to call it Mix Fusion Art. Just then, he clicked yes, claiming that this was Mix Fusion Art. Just then, a bat appeared, merging with the dragon. Arga was surprised, seeing that the dragon's wing shape and color had changed. Lala's overall stats had increased, but the racial skills remained the same. The bat's skill, Ultrasonic Wave, had been added. Arga got excited, seeing that Lala had gotten stronger overall. He held the dragon in front of him, claiming that he would make her stronger at this rate. Arga the Fusionist would definitely make her stronger. Suddenly, Arga felt a sudden wave of sadness as he reflected on his words. His mood swings are moving faster than his stat growth. He put Lala down along with the other monsters, telling them how lucky they were. They could get stronger and stronger through fusion, but he remained weak despite being called a once-in-a-thousand-years talent. Like his monsters, he wanted to become strong as well. He then thought about the bastards who treated him harshly, hoping he could show them what they missed. As Arga wallowed in sadness, he suddenly got a bright idea. He thought about fusion and how humans could do it with monsters. Magically and biologically, humans and monsters were almost identical. Considering that case, Arga asked himself if he should fuse himself with a monster. However, he couldn't help but think about the possibility of failing. He might turn into a chimera, or worse, die. At that moment, the screen asked Arga if he wanted to fuse with a lesser arachne. As he contemplated, he realized that if he succeeded, he could possess the power of monsters and become strong. With the glory of becoming strong, Arga hit the yes button, confirming the Mix Fusion Art. A massive explosion occurred, sending the nearby monsters hurling into the distance. When the dust settled, Arga was relieved to know that he was still alive. He checked his entire body and found that nothing particularly abnormal changed, confirming his success. To his surprise, a status window appeared, and only monsters could have it. Just then, he discovered that his race had been changed to demon human. A win is a win, I guess. Arga grew nervous, seeing the truth flashing in front of him. Apparently, he just stopped being human. Arga quickly ran to the Adventurers Guild, grabbing a quest from the board as he dashed inside. A man was amazed by his enthusiasm, asking if there were really a lot of good quests around the area. Once Arga got to the front desk, he immediately showed the quest to the attendant, telling her he would take the job. The attendant found that it was the goblin extermination in the northern plains. However, since the job was simple, the reward was low. Seeing her hesitation, Arga insisted that it was fine because he only wanted to test his strength. Suddenly, the attendant noticed something weird. Arga got taller. She asked if it had always been that way, so Arga admitted that he had been reborn. His physical changes were probably just the beginning. Confused, she asked what he was talking about. Before she could have her answer, Arga bolted towards the door as soon as he saw Namira. Namira asked the attendant if there was anything wrong with the boy, and she merely replied that there was something strange about him. He claimed he was reborn and he happily took cheap work. Namira shrugged it off, thinking Arga just wanted a fresh start. However, the attendant couldn't help but be worried about the goblin extermination quest, as Arga was barely a beginner. Namira was surprised to hear about it and he fell silent for a moment. Just then, the attendant asked if Arga was going to be okay, but Namira replied that the northern plains were somewhat dangerous at the moment. Elsewhere, Arga arrived at the northern plains, silently spying on the goblins. He then looked back at his monsters, informing them that the goblins were the perfect opponents to test the strength fusion. He then summoned his screen, muttering to himself that he would test his own power after. Becoming a demonic human changed many things. His life force and magic power increased about 4 times, and his attack power went from 5 to 81. Since he fused with a spider-like monster, he also gained the ability to produce spider silk. However, the one skill he was curious about was the final evolver. Experience points were now gained at double the rate, and the required amount to level up had been halved. This meant leveling up would be significantly faster now. Just as he processed this new advantage, a goblin suddenly shifted its gaze toward him. They were spotted. Arga quickly commanded Lala to release her ultrasonic wave, prompting the creature to emit a powerful sound-based attack. The ultrasonic blast struck the enemy goblins, disorienting and stunning them mid-charge. Meanwhile, Arga was pleased, thinking that the skill gained from fusing with the bat came in handy. Without missing a beat, Arga raised his hand and called out to the rest of his monster allies, urging them forward. Lily, one of Arga's monsters, charged forward with explosive force, ramming into an enemy with the power she had acquired after fusing with a boar-type creature called Little Boar. Nearby, Lulu, another monster, sank her sharp teeth into a goblin, having gained a new bite skill through her fusion with a kobold, a creature known for its dog-like head. Arga observed their improvements, noting that both of them had grown stronger. Not wanting to fall behind, he brandished his knife and rushed forward. He slashed a nearby goblin in the face, and to his shock he actually split the creature in half. As the goblin fell to the ground, Arga stood in disbelief. He asked himself if he actually sliced the goblin in two with a mere knife. Before, he had no muscle strength and couldn't even cut properly. Realizing that, Arga let out an awkward laugh. Suddenly his status window popped up, revealing his vast list of accomplishments. He couldn't believe that he just gained consecutive level-ups just from defeating goblins. He even got a skill that gave him more experience. As he stared at the screen, he wondered if he also got experience from the goblins everyone else defeated. He quickly checked his monster's stats and found that everyone had increased dramatically, especially his. As he went on to check his own status, he found out that his attack power was at 241 and his agility was at 301. At this point, he wasn't just an A rank but an S rank. He might really become the strongest. Just then, Arga heard a thundering roar behind him. To his shock, a bear-like creature 100 times his size was looming over him. His eyes widened in fear and he could only stare at his imminent death. Bro's luck subscription just expired. Back at the guild, the attendant was shocked to know that a sword bear was dwelling in the northern plains. Namira confirmed it, adding that there had been multiple sightings recently. The attendant asked if the creature was designated as C rank, and Namira made it clear that it was C rank overall. It had fur as sharp as swords and arms with razor-sharp claws. The attack power alone was A rank. The attendant freaked out, reminding Namira that Arga was merely an E rank. If he encountered it, he would surely be killed. Back at the northern plains, Arga calculated his next move. Becoming a demon human maxed out his companion art, so he might be able to tame the sword bear too. However, on that day he would do more than that. Before proceeding, he told his monsters to stay back. He swore to defeat the beast as he charged forward. Meanwhile, the sword bear roared, asserting its dominance. Arga thought that if he could take down an A rank, he could earn massive experience. He would level up all at once. Finally, he had drawn closer to the bear, and he wasted no time in slashing it. However, his knife chipped, and he freaked out at the thought that the bear's fur was hard. A knife wouldn't do the job. He wondered if he should beat it with his fists, but then he realized it would be tough to punch through its sharp fur. Just then, the bear charged forward, striking fear into Arga as he saw its fast movements. In a split second, it tore through the ground, eager to kill Arga. Thankfully, he managed to dodge the attack with the spider silk that came from his skill. As he dangled silently, a bright idea crossed his mind. He would use his skill to defeat the sword bear. He quickly spun some spider silk, covering his fists. Without wasting time, he quickly charged towards the creature with his spider silk gloves. He punched the bear in its gut, making it cough up blood. Arga was furious, claiming he was not afraid of its fur armor anymore. He released a barrage of attacks, making the bear scream in agony. Not long after, it fell on the ground, succumbing to its death. Arga smiled, realizing he won. He just defeated a C-rank monster. Arga then looked at the sky, praying to the gods to let him get even stronger, enough to make Kanado and the others regret it. Arga took on a quest from the guild, and he hurriedly excused himself to complete it. As he headed out, he was convinced that the request should be finished in a jiffy. However, before he could leave, Namira's gigantic hand stopped him in his tracks. He asked Arga if he was in a hurry, making him tense. He placed his hand on Arga's shoulder, reminding him not to run inside the guild. Arga apologized, then waved Namira goodbye as he left. As soon as he was gone, Namira noticed that Arga had gotten stronger, much to the guild attendant's surprise. Based on their interaction, the young man's dynamic vision and agility had improved. His physique was like it belonged to a different person from before. The attendant thought there was no way that was possible, but Namira could tell accurately just from a glance. Arga seemed to be on a high level. Just then, Namira asked if Arga had taken a request that day, and the attendant confirmed it, adding that he took on low-difficulty menial tasks. She then handed her book records, proving that sometimes Arga took on requests multiple times a day. He even chose exterminating 3-horned rabbits. The attendant believed that one couldn't grow rapidly with stuff like that, so everything must be in Namira's imagination. Namira remained silent, deep in thought. Meanwhile, Arga was interested in the thought of the horn rabbits as they might be useful for fusion. He was determined to tame one of them. Just then, someone called out to him, catching his attention. He asked the stranger if he needed something, completely unfazed that he was standing before two men twice his size. The strangers introduced themselves as Razul and Norshi, and they asked if he was Arga, the E-rank tamer banished by Kanado. Razul screamed that Kanado climbed the S-rank at only 18 years old, and he claimed he was his idol. Norshi added that there were many who wanted to join Kanado's party, and they were among those people. However, a weakling like Arga was accepted for 2 years. Arga smirked, telling the men if it was about jealousy, then they should spare him. He turned his back on them, saying it was not his concern anymore. Just then, the men argued that this wasn't the issue. What pissed them off was Arga's attitude. Razul asked Arga why he was living with a smile, calling him a bastard. Arga was confused, and he reminded the men to know their place. Norshi then told Arga that he caused trouble for everyone's idol, Kanado, and he should reflect and look apologetic. This is exactly how a stan would react if you called them gay. However, Arga was barely moved by their threat, asking why he should even reflect. He argued that Kanado should be the one reflecting because he was trash who made him join arbitrarily and didn't even bother to take care of him until the end. He bluntly told the men that they were admiring trash, then asked if they were idiots. Furious, Razul and Norshi furiously called him a bastard. They grabbed their weapons, warning that they would teach this E-rank brat a lesson. He never should have looked down on B-ranks like them. Arga quickly took out his knife, calling out the men for drawing weapons in the guild. Meanwhile, the attendant grew concerned, telling Namira that they had to stop them. However, Namira remained calm, insisting that they should watch for a bit because they might just see how strong Arga had become. Just then, Razul and Norshi attacked, swinging their weapons in anger. However, before they could even do any damage, Arga slashed his knife, blowing the men away without even tarnishing his blade. The attendant was shocked, but Namira remained unfazed. Meanwhile, Razul and Norshi cursed as they received the impact of Arga's attack. Arga then reminded them that using weapons inside the guild was a violation. To make them more furious, he asked if they were idiots. Razul couldn't believe he was blown away by an E-rank tamer, while Norshi couldn't help but feel lame for being lectured. With their egos on the line, they immediately got back on their feet to land punches at Arga. However, Arga was too fast for them. He noticed something strange. There was no way B ranks were that slow. Earlier, they also lost their stance easily. Arga wondered if they were trying to fool him into letting his guard down or if this was some kind of trap. Arga didn't know what it was, but in that case, he decided to take advantage of the situation. He wasted no time in kicking Razul in the throat, sending him flying. He headed towards Norshi next, thinking that if he acted confused, openings would appear for him to go along with. When he got the perfect timing, he landed a strong punch on the man's jaw, knocking him down instantly. Arga noticed that they both stopped moving. He wondered if this was also a trap, and if they would attack from somewhere. Wanting answers, he attempted to punch them again, demanding to know what kind of trap he was facing. Peace was never an option for this guy. However, before he could do that, Namira stopped him. He told the young man it was enough, leaving him surprised. Arga told Namira to move aside, believing that Razul and Norshi were still planning something. Namira said no, insisting that it was over. Both of them are already unable to fight. Arga couldn't believe it. There was no way B ranks were that weak. Namira noticed that Arga's senses hadn't caught up to his actual level. He had become strong enough to overwhelm B ranks, and it seemed like everyone understood except him. Just then, they both overheard the bystanders preaching that the tamer overwhelmed the braggarts without even using monsters. They were amazed, knowing that Razul and Norshi were B ranks who were close to being A ranks. Another one chimed in, saying Arga's movements didn't seem like an E ranks. Arga was too stunned to speak, so Namira gently held his hands and advised him to show restraint from now on. Arga stuttered, merely saying yes. As he made his way out into the streets, he couldn't help but think about Namira's advice. He had become strong enough to need to hold back in a fight. Arga smiled while thinking about it. That's when I know we're all in danger. Meanwhile, Namira observed him from the windowsill. The attendant stood beside him, commenting that Arga had really become incredibly strong. She wondered why it was so sudden, but Namira didn't have answers. Just then, she speculated that the second job was related to Arga's newfound strength. Namira wasn't quite sure, and he still had to investigate the young man. Just then, a woman approached them, welcoming herself to the conversation. She heard about the second job and asked if they were talking about the person from earlier. The people in the guild suddenly noticed the woman, amazed by her beauty. She was Cecile Le Cerciel, humanity's strongest SSS rank. She then rested playfully on the counter, asking the attendant to tell her about the man from earlier. In a dark, eerie cave, gigantic centipedes roamed the place, searching for a man who had disturbed their slumber. The man kept silent, finally escaping the monsters. He thought about how dangerous the situation was, and he decided not to go that route anymore. He was furious at Kanado, and he swore he would curse him if he died. Just then, someone approached him asking if he had just said Kanado's name. It was Sissel, smiling at him innocently. The man asked why she was alone in such a dangerous place, and she replied that she was looking for Kanado's party because she had something to ask. She believed they went to the dungeon they were in. The man was silent for a moment, then he told her that they had already left. They actually left him behind, firing him for being a useless tamer. I think I've seen this film before. From there, he desperately tried to escape alone. Sissel was delighted to hear that he was the tamer in Kanado's party. Then she asked if he had heard from Arga. The man had heard a lot about Arga because he was constantly compared to him. Like when he didn't know a monster's name, Kanado would say that Arga would have known. His monster knowledge was apparently better than the new Tamer's. Cecil then asked if he had heard about his abilities, and the man confirmed it, specifying that Arga could crossbreed monsters. When he first heard it from Kanado, he refused to believe that Tamer's were capable of doing it, since it was a different occupational skill. Kanado didn't believe the man either, and he asked if he was kidding. Hearing that, Kanado and his girls laughed at the man, as they seemed to have hired an incompetent tamer who was inferior to Arga. Kanado's party thought Arga was normal because they had seen it many times. Just then, Sissel's eyes widened in curiosity, asking him to tell her more about that in detail. Elsewhere, Arga stood in a field staring at Lala. He took out his screen thinking that it suddenly glowed when it leveled up. Lala had evolved and had now become a little chimera dragon. Bro accidentally modded his dragon into an Elden Ring boss. Even though she looked grotesque, she was his responsibility. He carelessly repeated fusions with monsters that had little to no compatibility. He didn't know fusion materials would affect the evolution path that much. Stats-wise, it wasn't bad, but still. Just then, Arga got distracted, realizing that something interesting was nearby, the Palpari Labyrinth. It was a beginner-friendly labyrinth, and with his and the monster's strengths combined, they could challenge it with no problem. He was determined to let Lala's evolution continue, and he would correct the course. There were fusion materials in the labyrinth that would be convenient for correction. With that, Arga charged forward with his monsters. They were immediately greeted by tons of insects, but they were quick to defend themselves. Arga told his monsters to let the small fries scatter, as the real target was the metal stag beetle. To correct Lala's course to a proper evolution, he needed a beetle type and steel type element. The metal stag beetle had both. To his surprise, he soon found one. He used his tame ability on a few of the metal stag beetles, but he failed every time. He could only attempt to tame 3 times per monster, and it failed. In that case, Arga decided to take the beetle's abundant experience and move to the next one. He leveled up 6 times, then decided to head deeper into the labyrinth. Meanwhile, Sissel kept talking to the ex-tamer from Kanado's party. She found out that Arga fused monsters together and changed the color, and she wondered if the strength could be changed too. The man didn't know, but both Arga and the monsters might become really strong. Sissel asked why, and the man revealed that he had heard stories about Arga, that he was fusing a baby dragon. Just then, their conversation was cut short when a giant centipede appeared, roaring in fury. Cecil immediately stood up, thanking the man because she was able to confirm things properly. She was lucky, and so was the man, as he could now cut ties with those unpleasant guys and return safely. Dude, this woman has no sense of urgency. Suddenly, Sissel drew out her jet black sword, revealing her true identity to the man. He stuttered in her presence, then she stated the obvious, claiming she was the SSS rank, Cecil. She winked at the man, promising to escort him outside. Soon after, Sissel brought the man safely to the outside world where they both parted ways. She smiled at the thought of Arga, a tamer and a fusionist. She couldn't believe a person like that existed. A few days before, Cecil asked Namira if he understood what kind of abilities Arga had. She asked if he was his friend, but Namira said they were not that close. The attendant pointed out that he talked to the young man often, and Namira said that he only kept an eye on him because there might be something about him, like how he became a high-difficulty tamer through self-study, and when he heard about the dragon species. The attendant seemed curious, so Namira revealed that Arga had a baby dragon as one of his companions. The attendant recalled that it was a weak species, but Namira pointed out that dragon species basically couldn't be tamed. Dragon species judge their opponent's talent, and they reject taming unless they sense considerable talent or power. Hearing that, the attendant wondered if this meant Arga had considerable talent. Namira wasn't so sure if it was true, and he had yet to confirm it. Sissel, on the other hand, was curious about fusion art and a baby dragon, so she decided to confirm it herself. Without wasting time, she left without saying a word. After she heard the story from Arga's former companions, she finally obtained information. She then thought about Arga and how he might fulfill her dreams. In a dark-lit labyrinth, an ogre boss roared in fury, its voice echoing through the corridors. Despite being attacked by Arga's monsters, the ogre kept fighting. Finally, it was defeated, knocked out before Arga. As Arga stared at the fallen beast, he realized it had gotten weak and that he should tame it soon. His monsters had grown so fast that even the labyrinth boss, a D-rank ogre, was no longer an enemy. Then, out of nowhere, the ogre stood up, landing a strong blow on Arga's face. To the beast's shock, Arga stood unscathed, merely smirking at its attempt. In a snap, Arga hurled the ogre to the ground, forcefully smashing its face. D-rank monsters couldn't even scratch him anymore. Without wasting another moment, he tamed the ogre, reducing it to a simple crate. Arga was pleased, seeing the boss drop before him. He excitedly opened it, wondering what was inside. His eyes widened upon seeing its contents, and he was surprised. Not long after, Arga returned to town, thinking he was incredibly lucky. He got the ogre's rare drop, the Horn of Battle. To make it better, he got 2 of them. A rare drop is probably 1 in 10,000, and the probability of 2 items dropping is 1 in 100,000. That being said, it's 1 in 100 million luck. He planned on storing one and selling the other. It should be worth 1,000 gold coins, and he could live unemployed for 3 years. He could already see it, and he started asking himself what he should do by then. Just then, someone called out his name. It was Kanado. Arga sneered, seeing the familiar face before him. Kanado tensely asked what happened to his body, which made Arga confused. Now that he thought of it, he used to literally look up at Kanado. This made him wonder if he had gotten bigger after becoming a demon human and leveling up. One of the girls asked if he had gotten into weird drugs, and the other agreed, recalling how embarrassed he was about being short. Justice for the short kings, please. Just then, Kanado pointed to the Horn of Battle, unable to believe his eyes. He thought it was impossible to get an ogre's drop, but Arga only smirked and confirmed it was real. The girls teased him again, thinking he got it as charity by leeching off some random party. Or worse, he could have stolen it. Arga was more enraged than ever, arguing that he got it with his monsters. Kanado sighed, saying it was fine and that he didn't need to show off with just a D-rank drop. Suddenly, he showcased a ring, boasting that it was a B-rank rare drop. They got the Ghost Prince rare drop, which was way better than Arga, who only had knowledge. Kanado strongly believed that everything else about him was trash. He then asked the young man if he was jealous. If Arga were with them, he could get good stuff like the ring. Having said that, he asked Arga if he wanted to come back. Arga was confused, yet Kanado took this as a confirmation. He tried to act benevolent as if Arga insisted, and he allowed him to return. Arga saw the situation for what it was. They wanted him to come back. Because they lacked monster knowledge, they were probably starting to have trouble with labyrinth conquests. They were the type to get excited over a worthless ring. However, in reality, high-ranking rare drops weren't necessarily superior. There were duds too, and they didn't even have that knowledge. Those kinds of people had realized Arga's value, and they were roundaboutly trying to recruit him again. Suddenly, he turned his back on them, laughing as he asked who would ever go with them. Kanado was baffled, while one of the girls asked if he was seriously going to rudely reject Kanado's kindness. Furious, Arga told them to shut up. Suddenly, his monsters appeared, freaking out the team. One of the girls was grossed out by the chimera-looking monster, while the other was threatened by the hairy wolf. Kanado, on the other hand, thought that the slime was the most normal one of the bunch, yet it was somehow different from before. Arga demanded the team disappear from his sight. Left with no choice, they reluctantly left, accusing Arga of being barbaric. Acting like a victim, one of the girls screamed that resorting to violence was the worst. Arga thought he was lucky, but to run into those guys proved otherwise. Living carefree for 3 years was off the table after all. He then swore to himself that he would get so strong that those guys wouldn't look down on him. Meanwhile, the team secured distance from Arga. One of the girls was irritated by him, while Kanado complained about not being able to recruit him again. Just then, the other girl asked what they should do. Without someone knowledgeable about monsters, conquest would be tough. Kanado acted unbothered, reassuring his team that he would think of a method that wouldn't require a tamer. Elsewhere, Arga handed one of the horns to a dealer, wanting him to purchase it. Arga planned to exchange it for money and buy a weapon, knowing that his knife had dulled after so many trips to the labyrinth. The dealer took a close look at the horn, then handed Arga a single coin. He claimed it was fake, but he would buy it for 1 gold coin. Arga stared at the coin in his hand and laughed, recalling how he thought he was lucky that day. Suddenly, Arga slammed the coin on the back of the dealer's hand, slashing it upon impact. Blood spurted everywhere, making the dealer scream. Arga said keep the change, and left it in his bloodstream. The dealer frantically asked what he had done, but Arga was too enraged to answer. He accused the dealer of being a scammer, refusing to believe the horn was fake. He argued it was a legitimate item dropped directly from an ogre. As an apology, he demanded that the dealer buy it for 2,000 gold coins and throw in the most expensive knife in the store. Not wanting to yield, the dealer rang a bell, warning Arga not to mess with him. A group of thugs started gathering around Arga, and without wasting time, they attacked him. As one of the thugs bolted towards him with a knife, Arga remained calm. thinking that he had entered the worst shop imaginable. It would be better for the world if the place closed down. Then without being bothered, he knocked down the thug with a single punch. He suddenly went berserk, screaming that he was on edge that day and that those guys would be unlucky. However, he realized that he might be the unlucky one. As the fight progressed, the thugs admitted that Arga was good. Suddenly, someone called out his name. It was Sissel. Her eyes gleamed with excitement, seeing that Arga was there. One of the thugs, realizing that Sissel knew Arga, quickly jumped at the opportunity to hold her hostage. He commanded Arga to stop or else he would slice up the girl. Sissel got upset, reminding the thug she was talking and that he should be quiet. Just then, Sissel simultaneously slammed the thugs toward the wall, shocking Arga. Arga buffered, while Sissel yapped about how she searched for him everywhere. Arga tried to recall what had just happened as he wasn't able to see it. Suddenly, the dealer chimed in, claiming the girl was Sissel. Arga's eyes widened in shock, knowing that Sissel was the strongest human. Just then, Sissel spoke to Arga. She knew it was sudden, yet she wanted him to listen to her request, to form a party with her. Arga just got a party invitation from humanity's strongest, a thought that made him nervous. He was stuck at the moment, wondering if he was lucky or unlucky. Arga stuttered, asking if she truly wanted to form a party with him. Sissel confirmed it and even said, "Please." At that moment, Arga thought about how Sissel was said to have single-handedly destroyed evil dragons, demon lords, and evil gods. She was truly a living legend, so why would humanity's strongest want to team up with him? Just then, he asked Sissel if she had any proof to show him she was real. Sissel was confused. Then she reminded him of how strong she was earlier. Arga admitted she was certainly strong, but it wasn't enough. He had just dealt with a crooked dealer, so he wasn't too trusting lately. Sissel understood, then claimed to have proof of her claims. She brandished the divine bone blade made from an evil god's bone, and she claimed to be the only one who had it. Arga was unamused, telling her that even if she showed it, he had never seen it before. Sissel was stunned. Then she remembered something. She got embarrassed, realizing that she should have shown the item from the very start. It was none other than her adventurer card, which she had tucked in between her gigantic milkers. She said booby trap, and meant it literally. Arga was shocked, seeing how she casually pulled it out from there. Based on the card, Arga learned that she was Sissel Le Cerciel, age 18 and a rank SSS. She was a sword saint, a holy knight, and a dark mage. On top of it all, her level of attack power was immeasurable, and she had all the skills. Arga seemed to choke on what he read, thinking it was insane. She had 3 occupations, which were basically like having a third job. He quickly handed back her adventurer card, saying that it was settled. She was definitely the real deal, which somehow reassured Sissel. Just then, Arga asked why humanity's strongest wanted to team up with an E-rank like him. Sissel paused, then said that she had always been the strongest. Since she was little, no one could match her in combat. Arga admired it, but Sissel argued it was actually a tragedy. Having been on top from the beginning, she had lived a boring life with no goals or thrills, and so she yearned for it, defeat. Seeking that, she traveled the world. It didn't matter if they were evil dragons, demon lords, or malicious gods. They were all weaker than her, and she despaired. As Arga listened, he realized this woman had an incredibly peculiar problem. Suddenly, Sissel shared that she eventually heard about Arga, that he had the ability to strengthen monsters through fusion. If he could create the strongest monster, she thought she could experience defeat. Arga's eyes widened in shock, now realizing why she wanted to team up with him. The tension between them lingered until he spoke again. If they were going to be a team, he had conditions. Sissel asked what they were, reassuring him that she would listen to anything. Arga's eyes narrowed, then he revealed what he wanted, which was for her to fight him. 1 week later, the arena was packed with spectators. A man wondered if Sissel was going to have a duel, but another corrected him, saying it was an entrance exam for her party. Either way, a lot of people gathered to see this reckless person. Just then, Arga emerged from the shadows, amazed to see such a crowd. Those guys from the shop must have spread the word, which somehow made things convenient for him. Sissel then approached him, saying he was amazing. He had gotten really strong, and she could tell just by looking. Arga smiled, recalling that he had made a promise. Back when they struck a deal, Arga admitted that the current version of himself wasn't worthy to stand by her. However, he would show her that he could become a worthy man in 1 week. Just then, Sissel readied her sword and asked if they should see what he's got. Arga quickly took on the challenge and both prepared their stance. As Arga gazed at Sissel, he couldn't help but notice the incredible pressure. He felt like he couldn't win against her, but he couldn't back down now. Meanwhile, one of the spectators asked if the man in the arena was Arga, though he looked a bit different. The man's companion asked if he was referring to the Arga who was known as Kanado's lackey. This was Arga's reputation in the world. He knew that if he teamed up with Sissel, he would have the same fate, branded as her lackey. He won't run away. He would face it and show everyone. He He suddenly dashed towards Sissel at an incredible speed, screaming that he had changed. The crowd's mouths gaped wide open, seeing how fast he was. Meanwhile, Arga's knife clashed with Sissel's sword, yet she remained unmoved, sending Arga back from the impact. In 1 week, Arga practiced fusion and had over 100 level-ups. He raised his stats and acquired considerable skills, yet Sissel was like a giant wall. He couldn't see any way to win at all. Suddenly, Sissel called him amazing, having kept up with her that much. He was now as strong as she was when she was 2 years old. Arga twitched at the thought, grasping the situation at hand. Meanwhile, the crowd saw that Arga was fighting evenly against Sissel, who was known to defeat even evil gods in a fraction of a second. Suddenly, Arga leapt in the air, avoiding Sissel's sword. His opponent had a sword made from an evil god's bone, and he knew that his black dragon fang, which he got from the crooked merchant, wouldn't last. Just then, Sissel pointed out that Arga didn't use monsters, but he made it clear he won't be using them. It would be troublesome if they were killed. Sissel grew concerned, saying she wouldn't do such a thing. Arga suddenly ran towards her, saying accidents could happen. He flashed a determined look, then unleashed his monsters for a surprise attack. Sissel screamed that he was cheating, as he just said he wouldn't use them. Arga said no monsters, then pulled out a whole Jurassic Park. The monsters were decoys. If he attacked from behind, even humanity's strongest should take some damage. However, as his dagger drew closer to Sissel, she suddenly said the idea was good. Arga's eyes widened in surprise, and before he knew it, all 3 monsters were blown away at once. He wondered how it happened, but on the bright side, they didn't seem dead. He mentally apologized to his monsters, but thanks to their sacrifice, he could close the distance enough. He slashed his dagger, but all he hit was air. To his shock, Sissel's sword was now against his neck. Only then did he realize that he had fallen for her afterimage tricks. She then told him that if he moved fast enough, afterimages would happen naturally. Arga yielded. Then he asked how she handled the 3 monsters. Sissel revealed that she merely flicked them, like how she did with the thugs the other day. Arga couldn't believe it. She made such damage from a single finger flick. Just then, he laughed defeatedly, announcing his surrender. To his confusion, the crowd suddenly erupted in cheers. They called him amazing and said it was a good match. They now had respect for Tamers. Sissel then asked him if he was satisfied and if he would become her companion. Arga said yes, knowing he wouldn't be mocked anymore. 2 days later, they ventured through an A-rank labyrinth known as the Kakip Labyrinth. Sissel asked if Arga wanted to see her fight, and he confirmed it. He knew she was strong, but he still wanted to see her fight monsters in actual combat. Sissel said it would be fine, then suddenly disappeared within a nanosecond. Without realizing it, a monster now lay dead before them. Sissel asked how it was, but Arga requested her to do it one more time. He was watching even then, but Sissel was way too fast. As they went deeper into the labyrinth, Sissel explained to Arga that he couldn't see her ability. A rank was over in an instant, which baffled Arga. At minimum, it needed to be an S-rank labyrinth. However, Arga reminded her that based on regulations, an E-rank like him couldn't enter S-rank labyrinths. Sissel didn't see this as a problem, and she suggested taking the test, the promotion exam. Arga thought about the promotion. To enter an S-rank labyrinth, he had to be promoted to S-rank. Arga wondered if he was going to be okay, but Sissel reassured him that she would recommend him, enabling him to take the exam. As if she were out of touch with reality, Sissel wanted him to achieve SSS rank. Arga was terrified, realizing that this was the highest rank there was. He had finally formed a party with Sissel, but at what cost? He wanted a raise and got raised into the afterlife. Kanado and his team stood before the labyrinth's entrance, hesitant to enter. One of the girls mentioned she was nervous to enter an SS rank labyrinth, but Kanado reassured her it would be fine. With their strategy, they would break through even without Arga or a Tamer. The other girl agreed with Kanado, convinced they didn't need such a loser. Not long after, they ventured to conquer the labyrinth in order to get promoted to SS rank. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, Namira and the attendant overheard rumors about Kanado's party. They apparently started using chicken tactics, wherein they would skip the small fry along the way and defeat the boss with poison. One bystander asked why they would use such a flawed strategy, and another guessed that it was because they were the type to run through Tamers immediately. They didn't understand the importance of knowledge. Anyone with decent ability should realize the value of the information that Tamers possess. Namira and the attendant overheard everything, but they kept quiet and headed to a secret door. The attendant was surprised to see a winding staircase below, but she maintained her composure and accompanied Namira. At the ground floor, they found a large hall where Namira greeted his guest. It was Arga, and he brought Sissel with him. Namira smiled, noting that Arga had grown remarkably. He now understood why he was challenging an SSS rank. Arga awkwardly scratched his head, making it clear that Sissel told him to. Just then, Namira pointed out that they formed a party. However, before they could continue their conversation, someone called out to Namira, telling him to cut the pointless small talk and get started. It was a buff, gigantic man staring at Arga with a threatening aura. Arga, on the other hand, was unamused that he called their conversation pointless. Just then, Namira introduced Arga to the man, whose name was Raja, an SAS rank adventurer. He was also the examiner for the promotion test. Suddenly, Arga's eyes widened, asking if he had met Raja somewhere before. Raja answered that he probably met his brother, Razul. Finally, Arga had recalled Razul, the guy who had picked a fight with him at the guild before. The thought amused him, but Raja was rather upset as Arga beat up his big brother. Tears welled in his eyes, claiming that his big brother had been depressed and a shut-in ever since. Big Bro had the rank, but not the emotional stability. Arga raised an eyebrow, pointing out that Razul was the one who picked a fight. He said sorry, but he believed that man got what he deserved. Raja seemed to pop a vein in frustration, and he swore to kill Arga. The attendant grew concerned, and she told Arga that he worsened the atmosphere. Namira laughed awkwardly, saying that it was bad from the start. Just then, he told Raja and Arga to face each other while he explained the rules. However, Namira didn't even get to finish explaining, as Raja had already swung his weapon at Arga. He claimed that the first strike would win, and he would kill him. Everyone was stunned, even Arga. Luckily, he narrowly dodged the attack, falling on the floor beneath them. Raja took the chance to swing again, missing Arga by a few inches. He asked Arga what was wrong, and he urged him to fight back. Worried, the attendant turned to Cecil, suggesting that they should help Arga because Raja had cheated from the start. However, Cecil only told her it would be fine and that it would be over soon. She said, "It'll be over soon," like she's reading the eulogy ahead of time. It looked like Raja would be beaten. Meanwhile, Raja screamed as he swung his weapon, telling Arga to die. However, the look of fear suddenly flashed on his face as if he sensed his inevitable end. Before he could realize it, he was sent flying, crashing into the wall behind him. Arga had punched him, and it only took a single blow. Blood spurted uncontrollably from his mouth, signaling his defeat. The attendant couldn't comprehend Arga's win, knowing he should have been at a disadvantage from the surprise attack. Arga's gaze softened, explaining to her that he had expected him to fight dirty, so he was on guard. Suddenly, Namira recalled that he seemed shocked by the surprise attack. Arga looked exhausted as he explained that it was because Raja's movements were so slow, and he couldn't believe it. At the moment, he wondered if Raja was deliberately slowing himself to make him put his guard down. Then he remembered that he had thought the same thing about Razul. Bro was so slow, Arga had time to question the plot. Just in case, Arga pretended to lose his balance to see what Raja could do. It seemed like being slow wasn't on purpose after all. Suddenly, the attendant asked why he was running around after, and Arga explained he was aiming for the perfect timing. He was trying to defeat him without dealing a fatal blow. The attendant couldn't believe it, seeing how Arga showed such consideration. Arga explained that Namira told him to, remembering the time when the man advised him to show restraint. True enough, he showed restraint, proving to Namira that he had truly grown. Without question, Namira told him he had passed. He now recognized Arga Abilian as an SSS rank adventurer. Arga received his new adventurer card later that day, and he couldn't even believe he became an SSS rank that easily. Cecil smiled, recalling how she told him it would be fine. She then asked what they should do now since he could enter every labyrinth. Arga was troubled. Now that he could go anywhere, choosing had become harder. Hearing that, Cecil suggested having a promotion party first and thinking about their dilemma later. However, before they could proceed with their plans, Kanato and one of his teammates called out his name. They kneeled before him, desperately asking for his help. Several hours ago, Kanato and his team hurriedly tried to leave the labyrinth. As they headed up the stairs, a giant tree trunk suddenly smashed through the entrance, preventing them from leaving. Kanato knew the situation was no good. It was as far as they could go. One of the girls told him not to give up, reminding him he was about to become an SS rank. However, Kanato thought the final boss was too strong. As they looked down the stairs, an ominous figure smiled back at them, its teeth glowing in the dark. One of the girls suggested retreating with a stone, but Kanato argued there was no opening to use the return stone. In a moment of desperation, one of the girls pushed the other one down the stairs. Kanato screamed as Raton, the girl, landed roughly below. He called out Sans, the other girl, asking her what she was doing, but she reasoned it was their chance to use the return stone. She believed Raton would be fine, as she could manage with evasion and defense magic. They could just come back to help her. Sans really went from party member to Final Destination director. Kanato agreed with the plan, and he quickly activated the return stone. Before leaving, he apologized for Raton and promised to return right away. Raton reached out to them in desperation, but they had already left her. She gritted her teeth in anger, overwhelmed by the betrayal. Arga was uninterested in their story, simply reducing the event to them abandoning Raton and running away. Kanato argued, saying they were going back to help, which wasn't the same as abandoning her. Arga said it was so like him using such selfish excuses. Suddenly, Kanato screamed Arga's name, telling him to help save her. With a Tamer's knowledge, he should know how to defeat the thing that attacked them. However, Arga shot him with a question, asking if he was now relying on him after banishing him. He asked again if Kanado was going to say it wasn't banishment if he recruited him again. Kanado stuttered, saying he was reflecting on the banishment. Arga mocked his so-called reflection, then said he would help them out. Kanado and Sans were hopeful, but their joy was short-lived when Arga retracted his statement. It was what he thought, but an E rank like him couldn't enter SS rank labyrinths. He simply said it was too bad, making Kanado curse under his breath. As they left, Sans complained about their wasted effort in bowing their heads. Kanado was just as angry, calling Arga a damn Tamer. Just then, Arga spoke, casually showcasing his card and saying he just got promoted. Bro said, "I'm weak," then casually dropped the Divine Uno reverse card. Kanado's eyes widened, seeing it was an SSS rank card. He asked if Arga was serious or if it was forged. However, Arga maintained his playful grin, saying he could enter SS rank labyrinths. Just then, he remembered Kanado's sorry excuse for a reflection, and the man apologized promptly. Cecil asked Arga if he was truly companions with this trash, and he embarrassingly replied he was surprised himself. Finally, Arga vowed to save Ratone. However, he didn't need Kanado and Sans, as they would only get in the way. He would hand Ratone over at the guild, and Cecil would accompany him to conquer the labyrinth. Upon hearing the name, Kanado and Sans were baffled to know that he was working with the world's strongest. Kanado asked why someone like that would be with Arga, while Sans said it was impossible. However, they chose not to argue, knowing it would work out in their favor. Later that day, Arga and Cecil arrived at the Isolt labyrinth. Before entering, Arga asked Cecil to give him time to fuse his monsters. Suddenly, Cecil asked why he was doing this. Kanado and the others were selfish scum with no sense of remorse, and Arga didn't need to help them. To her surprise, Arga said he wasn't. Even if he wanted to help, Ratone was probably already dead. He wasn't helping, he was only getting revenge in his own way. The opponent they couldn't even touch, he whom they had mocked, would defeat it with ease. He would make them taste that bitterness. Shortly after, Arga had finished his preparations, and he finally clicked fuse. As the transformation took place, Cecil asked if that would really be revenge. Arga confirmed it, but that would not be the end of it. Just then, Lala started glowing, which was a sign of evolution. She suddenly darted toward the sky, leaving a trail of glittery material. Cecil exclaimed it was amazing to witness such a monster, as she had never seen anything like it. She also looked forward to what would come next. Later in the labyrinth, Arga and Cecil slayed the minor beasts with ease. Arga thought there was nothing impressive there, but Cecil reminded him that the area wasn't SS rank yet. As they ventured deeper, Cecil thought about Kanado and his use of chicken tactics in a labyrinth of that level. That only meant that he and his group were too weak. Arga agreed, noting that using a flawed strategy like chicken tactics was already stupid. Just then, a bull-like beast charged toward him, but he merely finished it in one punch without even looking. He kept talking, pointing out that skipping the path and using poison on the boss wasn't going to work, especially with bosses that had status ailment immunity skills. However, something bothered Cecil. The labyrinth's boss was a vampire, and there was something off about Kanado's story. Arga was concerned about it too, especially since they were able to retreat. Cecil shared that vampires were proud, and they hated it when their prey escaped. They should have interfered with the return stones using magic. Even if they offered a sacrifice, it wouldn't just pass up 2 more blood bags, but if it did let them go, it might be a mutant. Suddenly, the two found themselves facing a giant door. "There," Cecil continued, saying that if it were a vampire mutant, vampire princess, or vampire noble, they would be overwhelmingly stronger and nobler than SS rank vampires. Their rank would be SSS. Arga was curious, hearing that it was an SS rank labyrinth boss that was actually SSS rank. Cecil confirmed that it could happen sometimes. Suddenly, Arga asked if they were nobler. Wouldn't they be even less likely to let their prey go? Suddenly, a giant sword darted from inside the door, heading toward Arga at immense speed. He simply moved aside, and the sword hit the wall. He took one look at the weapon, recognizing it as a blood sword. Suddenly, a dark female figure laughed, saying it was well dodged. She introduced herself as Reina La Rorilcia, the great vampire princess. She then told Arga to be proud that he avoided her attack. Meanwhile, Arga expected the vampire princess to be a mutant, an SSS rank to be exact. He then turned to Cecil, and she told him to leave it to her. Just then, Arga readied his stance, summoning his monsters to act at his will. Reina was curious to meet a Tamer, but she warned that commanding lowly monsters wouldn't reach her. Reina smirked at Arga, seemingly unfazed by his monsters. Arga thought about the vampire princess Reina, and if she were an SS rank, then Kanado and the others' crushing defeat would make sense. Just then, he told Reina that he would remember her name, as she would be the first SSS rank monster that he would kill. He would make sure never to forget it. He then introduced himself as Arga, and he advised the vampire princess to remember the name of the one who would kill her. Reyna gritted her teeth in anger, unable to believe that Arga just looked down on her. She suddenly sprang from the ground, flashing her claws as she called Arga an insolent fool. Arga was quick to deploy Lala and Lily, telling them to go and attack. However, Reyna easily dodged the monsters' attacks, injuring them in the process. The monsters refused to yield, and they continued their relentless pursuit. Annoyed, Reyna released thousands of spears, aiming them at the monsters and screaming at them to get out of the way. The attack created an opening for Reyna, allowing her to secure a close distance with Arga. As she drew nearer, she told Arga to die with regret. Arga, on the other hand, only stood there unfazed, as if waiting for the attack. To Reyna's shock, Arga simply held her by the wrist. All that buildup for her to get nerfed in the tutorial level. Arga was convinced that an SSS rank like her was certainly strong. He had strengthened Lala and Lily to handle SS rank labyrinths, and he thought it would be tough with just those two, but not to this extent. But thanks to that, he could now see their current abilities. Reyna was baffled, realizing that Arga just tested her power with monsters. Arga's audacity infuriated her, yet she couldn't escape from his grip to assert dominance. Her eyes widened in shock, asking Arga if he was even human. Then without warning, Arga kicked Reyna, sending her flying into the distance. As she landed on the floor, blood spurted from her mouth. Arga loomed over her, telling her that among all those he had faced, she was at the highest level. However, she was not as strong as Cecil. Reyna could barely respond as she kept coughing out blood, but this didn't garner any sympathy from Arga. He kneed her in the stomach, making her furious. Suddenly, she summoned a sword through a portal, slashing it against Arga as she called him a bastard. However, Arga was quick enough to deflect the attack with his dagger. Reyna continued to attack, telling Arga that he got carried away. Then, to her shock, Arga snapped her sword at the stem. He didn't stop there, and he made sure to tear her clothing to embarrass her further. "We love a petty king!" Reyna backed away, quickly covering herself. As she healed from her injuries, she swore to never forgive Arga. With her strongest magic, she would turn him into pieces of meat. Mustering all the strength she had left, Reyna summoned 1,000 spears, announcing that no one who had received this magic had ever survived. Despite hearing her threats, Arga and Cecil only stood silent, waiting for the attack. Reyna smiled maliciously, screaming at Arga to die. As the spears came raining down on Arga, he simply turned to Lala, telling her to perform the dragon breath. Reyna froze, anticipating what would happen next. Suddenly, Lala released the dragon breath attack, creating a flame so massive that it disintegrated the spears within seconds. Arga observed the aftermath of his move while Reyna kneeled on the floor, unable to believe what had just happened. Arga walked toward her, telling her that the attack might have been effective against anyone other than a Tamer. He coldly told her that it was over and he bid her farewell. Suddenly, Reyna pleaded with Arga, telling him that she surrendered. Arga seemed confused, so Reyna cried her eyes out, apologizing and surrendering. She wailed, begging him not to kill her. Girl out here thinking mascara runoff is a defense buff. Arga was taken aback as Reyna admitted defeat, relentlessly apologizing. Cecil thought this was amazing. A proud vampire princess was crying and begging for her life. This was truly rare. Arga awkwardly agreed, but now he wondered what he should do. Just then, Reyna spoke to Arga with honorifics, telling him that she had a request. Arga was shocked by how she addressed him, while Cecil was excited by the fact that a vampire princess had a request. She urged Reyna to speak. Arga felt like this was throwing him off, but he still asked Reyna what her wish was. With a tear in her eye, Reyna pleaded with Arga to use his powers to kill her father. Arga and Cecil were confused to hear such a request. Confused, Arga asked Reyna if she truly wanted him to kill her father. He was cautious, as it was rare for a proud vampire princess to request patricide. Surely there would be circumstances. Because of that, he told Reyna to tell her story. Before sharing, Reyna thanked him for hearing her out. Then she went on to say that everything started about a month ago. 3 clergy members appeared in the room they were in, where Reyna and her father lived. They both thought about scattering the clergy members as usual, but they didn't expect them to be very strong. They injected some drug into the neck of Reyna's father, then they disappeared. Since then, her father had been losing his reason day by day, and eventually degenerated into a beast. Reyna couldn't bear to see him like that, and she wanted to see him free. She cried as she realized that the only way was to kill him. Her power wasn't enough to match her father's, and she was waiting for someone who could defeat him. Just then, Cecil turned to Arga, asking him what he planned on doing. Arga thought for a while, then he agreed to Reyna's request, much to her joy. She thanked Arga, calling him merciful. Cecil thought that if Arga didn't do it, then they wouldn't have conquered the labyrinth. Though Arga agreed with her, he was also curious about what kind of drug the clergy used. Cecil explained that the clergy always prioritized holy magic and hated medicine. It was questionable if they really were the clergy. Just then, Arga told Reyna that he would take on her request, but he had a condition. Before he could even say what it was, Reyna told him she was prepared. However, she suddenly blushed, reminding Arga to be gentle as it was her first time. Sis heard condition and immediately unlocked the OnlyFans side quest. Arga was stunned, wondering what she was even preparing for. Sissel was amused, telling the obvious fact that Reyna considered her body as the price. She called him a pervert, but Arga argued he never said anything like that. He then clarified that he was talking about making Reyna his companion. Reyna was shocked, assuming that being his companion equated to marriage. Arga freaked out, asking why her mind immediately went there. He then explained to her that he wanted to take her under his control, and if she did anything strange, he would store her in the shadows. He wanted to take precautions because he didn't completely trust her. Reyna understood, thinking that if she became trustworthy, they would get married. Arga had enough with her, so he simply told her to lead him to her father. Not long after, Arga and Sissel followed Reyna to the deepest part of the labyrinth. Cecil asked if Reyna's father was down there, and Reyna confirmed it, adding that her father preferred the underground spaces for some reason. Sissel was amused, seeing that the place was dim and vampire-like. Arga looked around, thinking that there were other passages to the underground. Just then, he asked Reyna if some stupid-looking guys had been to the labyrinth recently, specifically a group of 3, 1 man and 2 women. When Reyna said no, Arga recalled that Kanado and the others used chicken tactics through back routes and ended up there. What they encountered was probably Reyna's father. Arga then noticed a human skull nearby, guessing that Raton, who was left behind, might be in that state now. Just then, they reached a part of the labyrinth that reeked with an unpleasant smell. Arga wondered what it was, while Sissel already had a good guess. Suddenly, Reyna coldly informed them that her father was before them. Not Reyna casually saying, "That's my dad," like the man isn't out here melting nostrils. To their shock, an indescribable anomaly crawled towards them. Reyna's father had abnormal proportions and he looked like a monster. He crushed a nearby insect, swallowing it like a mindless creature. Sissel watched with pity, remarking that it was unsightly. Just then, Arga summoned Lulu to come out. Although the monster was not high level, it had detoxification skills, which they could try as a last resort. Suddenly, Lulu glowed, making Arga wonder why it was showing signs of evolution at a time like that. A loud explosion occurred, and Lulu revealed his new appearance. He had become a black slime. Arga checked Lulu's stats and shared that it had increased significantly. The species was Shoggoth, and he had never heard of it, making him wonder just what kind of monster it was. Cecil replied that it was an evil god type, and she shared that she had defeated one before. There was a Shoggoth among the evil god subordinates. Evil god-type monsters should have mental contamination abilities, one that could drive people insane. Hearing that, Arga guessed that this could be madness confusion. The drug injected into Reyna's father was also an evil god-type, which Cecil recognized from the smell. Cecil speculated that the drifting evil god smell and presence might have prompted Lulu's evolution. She didn't know if it influenced the evolution itself, though. Hearing the term evil god, Arga was convinced that they really weren't proper clergy. This made Reyna wonder why they would even do such a thing to her father. Just then, her eyes widened in horror, seeing that her father was running towards them with incredible speed. They had been spotted. Before proceeding with their plan, Arga asked Reyna if it was really okay to kill her father, and she said yes. With that, Arga ran towards Reyna's father, planning to sever his head. Even vampire nobles with high regeneration would die from that. However, as Reyna's father drew nearer, Arga was met with a punch. The impact sent him flying, and he was almost crushed by another attack. Vampire noble? Nah, that's Vampire Mayweather. Reyna called out to Arga in concern, while Sissel wondered what had just happened. Arga's reaction was delayed for a moment. Reyna's father attacked again, but Arga narrowly dodged it. Cecil advised Arga to create an opening and keep a distance, which he quickly considered. He then grabbed a rock, hurling it at the monster's eye. Reyna's father missed his attack, saving Arga. Arga noticed that blinding the enemy didn't faze him, and he just needed a little time. Just then, he spotted Lulu, reminding him of the ability he just acquired. He called out to Lulu, telling him to perform Madness Confusion. Lulu quickly fulfilled Arga's command, radiating his magic towards Reyna's father. Reyna and Sissel were on edge, while Arga observed with caution. Just then, Reyna's father screamed in pain, then he crashed to the ground. Arga was relieved, seeing that it worked. Cecil approached him, asking what had happened and if he was spacing out. Arga explained that he found someone unpleasant and lost concentration, which confused Cecil. Arga continued, saying that they were always unpleasant, but even in that state, they were still dragging him down. Suddenly, Arga spotted a figure of a petrified girl lying nearby. Sissel had a firm guess, and Arga confirmed that it was Raton, abandoned by Kanado. Not Raton cosplaying as a lawn ornament. He was confused by her appearance, as vampires weren't known to have petrification abilities. He guessed that maybe the evil god's influence awakened her abilities. Suddenly, Arga was reminded that the job wasn't done, so he turned to Reyna, reassuring her that he would end it quickly. Just then, he was surprised to see Reyna crying, staring at her father as he squirmed. Arga pitied her, and so he commanded Lulu to cancel Madness Confusion. Sensing the shock in Reyna's face, Arga explained that even though the monster had lost his sanity, he was still his companion's father. He then readied his dagger, saying that in the man's final moments, he should fight with dignity. In this moment, the battle reached a boiling point. Arga stood firm as he faced the monstrous figure charging toward him, and he reminded himself not to go down like before. Just then, Reyna's father swung his arm, but Arga was quick enough to slash his fingers off. Another punch followed, but Arga sliced off that very hand. Reyna was shocked as the hand landed in front of her, spurting out blood. However, Arga's victory was short-lived, as it only took a couple of seconds before Reyna's father regenerated his severed hands and fingers. Arga couldn't believe it, as he had already assumed that the wound would rot away. This monster's regeneration speed exceeded that, and Arga predicted that this would drag on unless he cut off his head. Suddenly, Reyna's father launched forward, but this time he didn't aim for Arga but at a nearby pillar. He hit it with his elbow, making Sissel wonder what he planned on doing. Just then, Reyna's father took a giant piece of the pillar, hurling it toward Arga. Arga narrowly dodged it, and he quickly caught on to the monster's tactics. He switched his approach because punching would get him slashed. However, Arga thought it was fine as long as he didn't get hit. Arga said, "If I don't get hit, I don't die." Revolutionary. Just then, a rock almost hit him, which made him realize that his plan was easier said than done. Because of that, he called out to Cecil, asking if she could help him. Cecil was concerned, and she reminded Arga that if she defeated the monster, then it wouldn't count as him conquering it. Arga told her not to worry, as he would surely be the one to defeat him. He then pointed to Ratone, and he told Cecil to retrieve her. He just couldn't fight decisively with Ratone lying over there. Cecil understood, knowing it was hard to work with. It would be troublesome if something hit and shattered her. With that, Cecil reassured Arga that she was on it. Reyna asked to help as well, but Cecil told her it was fine and that she would be quick. Without wasting time, Cecil disappeared in a flash, shocking Reyna. Meanwhile, Reyna's father attempted to throw another rock at Arga, but he stopped in his tracks when he noticed Cecil. Cecil smiled as the monster was able to follow her movements with his eyes. Truly, Reyna's father wasn't bad. Furious, the monster hurled the rock at her, causing a massive explosion that made Reyna shriek. However, Arga was calm and he simply smirked and thanked Cecil. To Reyna's surprise, Cecil had avoided the attack, and she safely retrieved Ratone. Cecil awkwardly said that Ratone was surprisingly heavy, and she advised her to go on a diet. Petitioned to rename her Ratonton, Cecil started it. Meanwhile, Reyna stood there confused, as she couldn't see Cecil's moves at all. Back in the battlefield, Arga could now move freely, and he was determined to end the fight. Just then, Reyna's father released a barrage of attacks, hurling multiple rocks at Arga. Arga quickly summoned Lala, commanding her to use Dragon Breath to burn everything down. Lala quickly performed Arga's commands, and in no time the place was filled with flames. As all of this went down, Reyna complained about not being able to see through the smoke. Meanwhile, her father rummaged through the smoke, hoping to capture Arga. Just then, he got his hands on something, revealing it to be Lulu. Suddenly, Arga emerged from the smoke, his dagger in hand as he planned to make use of his decoy. The monster looked at him dead in the eye, and Arga bid him farewell. Not one to give up, the monster swung his fist, eager to end Arga as well. Arga's eyes narrowed as he focused his aim. Meanwhile, Cecil watched calmly, while Reyna was anxious at the possible outcome. Just then, Arga swiftly passed by Reyna's father, successfully severing his head. As he landed on the ground, the monster's body crashed, spurting blood everywhere. Reyna fell silent, then she bid her father farewell. Noticing his grieving companion, Arga approached her and asked if she was okay. With tears in her eyes, Reyna said that it was very painful, but she was okay. Having her crazed father continue living like that would be more painful. She then thanked Arga, but he told her not to mention it. Suddenly a boss drop appeared and Arga went to check it out. As he opened it, he wondered what could be inside. Just then, Cecil's eyes widened, noticing the severed head close to Arga. The monster's eyes glowed, so Cecil quickly warned Arga that the head was still there. Suddenly, the severed head bubbled up, prompting Cecil to grab Ratone and Reyna to safety. As she jumped away, she screamed for Arga to get away. However, Arga only stood there confused, seemingly caught within the massive explosion caused by the severed head. Meanwhile, Reyna worriedly called out to him, afraid that he wasn't able to escape. As the explosion continued, Reyna and Cecil waited for Arga. Cecil remarked that it was quite the explosion. The power of Reyna's father was released all at once. She thought the evil god's power was quite amplified, and he had leveled up enough to follow her movements with his eyes. This made Reyna worried, and she wondered why Arga didn't run away. Cecil said this was only her speculation, but it seemed like mental contamination was an evil god-type ability. Maybe Arga was hit with a mental attack by Reyna's father at that moment, and his movement was sealed or something. Reyna thought there was no way, then she started to sulk. Suddenly, Cecil asked if she was wrong and she addressed this to Arga. Reyna was surprised, seeing that Arga had survived the explosion after all. Man's respond button got calluses. Arga replied to Cecil, saying it wasn't an attack but was something close to that. Reyna was overjoyed and she was relieved to see him safe. Arga then explained to them that he had Lala guard him at the moment of the explosion. Just then, he handed a small chest to Reyna, telling her that it was her father's boss drop. It seemed like a gift for her. Reyna was confused, wondering if Arga opened it and looked. However, Arga simply replied that he received those feelings, as her father had interfered with his mind. At that time, the severed head seemed to talk to him, desperately repeating the word please. It echoed in Arga's mind, along with emotions and various images. Meanwhile, Cecil guessed that Reyna's father saying please was a way for him to ask for Reyna to be taken care of. Reyna suddenly embraced the chest and she broke down. Just then, Arga told them that wasn't all. There was one more request. After that, they all returned to the guild, bringing Raton with them. He returned her to Kanado, still petrified and all. Kanado freaked out, unable to believe what she had become. Meanwhile, some adventurers noticed their dilemma and they assumed Raton was petrified. The clerk asked if she was defeated by Medusa, while another speculated she ran into a Hydra. Namira suddenly entered the room, observing what everyone was talking about. Meanwhile, Arga told Kanado and Sans that the labyrinth was impossible for them, yet he went alone and came back uninjured. Just then, Kanado asked what he would do, and how he would turn Raton back to normal. Arga was confused, so Kanado explained that he must have received a curse-breaking item or something from the boss drop. Arga denied finding anything like that, which infuriated Kanado and Sans. Kanado asked how he could turn Raton back, while Sans doubted that he really conquered the labyrinth. Their audacity's so high, NASA's trying to chart it. Arga was stunned at their behavior. Instead of being grateful for those who made efforts, they complained. They didn't know their place, and they only thought of their own convenience. He badly wanted to ask them whose fault it actually was. Suddenly, Arga smirked, thinking that these people couldn't even touch their opponent. They had mocked him and made him feel defeated, so he would make them feel that misery. He had been such a fool. He should have cut ties with these people as quickly as possible. He started to turn his back on them, causing Kanado to call out his name in anger. He then told Kanado that they should be the ones to find the curse-breaking method, as they were the ones who abandoned Raton. Everyone was shocked, while some were furious at what they had done. Not Arga pulling the cancel culture card. They angrily gathered around Kanado and Sans, demanding to know if they truly abandoned their companion. Kanado only stood there, anxious and sweating. One of the adventurers suddenly recalled that he heard rumors about a Tamer who was abandoned by Kanado's party. They had done this more than once. Abandoning companions was the one thing that adventurers should never do. Kanado tried to deny the allegations, but the adventurers were already enraged. What they had done was an act of betraying a companion, and they had entrusted their lives to each other. Just then, someone threw a cup at Kanado, prompting the other adventurers to start throwing various items on him and Sans as well. They were relentless, and they called them scums and a disgrace. Sans and Kanado received the backlash, though they pleaded for them to stop because they were getting hurt. Someone suddenly kicked Kanado on the back, telling him not to come near them. As he was getting trampled on, he cursed Arga. That man had foreseen that this would happen, which was why he arranged the handover at the guild. Just then, someone appeared before Kanado. It was Namira. Kanado pleaded with the guildmaster to help him and Sans, arguing that these people didn't even know the circumstances. However, Namira bluntly said that it seemed to be true that he and Sans had abandoned Raton. Kanado and Sans were shocked at this statement, yet Namira continued. Only Raton was petrified, while Kanado and Sans were unharmed. If it was abandonment, that would make sense. Kanado argued that there were circumstances, but Namira only said that whatever it was, he committed the conduct of an unbecoming adventurer. Hearing that, the angry adventurers agreed with Namira. Namira then told Kanado and Sans that he needed them to reflect and be punished. Meanwhile, Arga, who was about to leave, smiled as he realized that justice prevailed. Then, to Kanado and Sans's horror, Namira demoted them to E rank. Kanado stuttered, saying that it took 5 years to climb to S rank. However, the adventurers had no empathy left for them, and they believed that it served them right. E rank? That's not a demotion, that's a reset button. They then urged Kanado and Sans to hurry up and go find a way to break their companion's petrification. They kept throwing things at them, and they complained that it hurt. Meanwhile, Arga left and he went to meet the girls. Reyna asked if he was finished with his business, but he only smiled at them. Arga then complimented Reyna's new outfit, saying that it suited her well. It was a gift from her father, after all. Just then, Cecil asked Arga about what happened to his revenge against Kanado. He explained that they suffered terribly, but he didn't care about them anymore. He was blessed with good companions now, and that was the best revenge. Cecil agreed, nodding while she smiled. She then asked what Arga planned to do now, and he replied that he had already decided: revenge. Reyna was confused, and he just mentioned he was done with that. However, Arga continued his sentence, saying that it was for Reyna's father. He had one other request. At the time that Reyna's father showed Arga some images, an old building and suspicious people appeared. Probably when the fake clergy injected him with evil god power, Reyna's father had sensed fragments of their memories. Sissel asked if Arga planned to use that as a hint to find them and get revenge, and Arga confirmed it, saying that it was the feeling he received. He then turned to Reyna, asking if she wanted revenge, and she undoubtedly said yes. However, she started to worry if it was actually okay to involve Arga and the others further into her family matters. Sissel said it was fine and there was no need to hold back. After all, they had become companions. Reyna started to tear up, muttering Sissel's name. Sissel personally wanted to pursue the fake clergy too. As someone who once defeated an evil god, she was concerned about those involved with evil entities. With that settled, Arga invited the girls to begin their new venture. First, they had to look for that old building. Elsewhere, the fake clergy gathered in the ruins of an old fort. One reported to the others that the vampire noble had been defeated. Another chimed in, saying that if it was by humanity's strongest, then it couldn't be helped. Just then, another said that it wasn't the case. The one who beheaded the vampire noble was that woman's companion, a tamer named Arga, the holder of a second job or occupation. Another member added that the vampire princess joined them too, and it would be troublesome if they got involved. Just then, another spoke, saying that they had an idea. No matter who the opponent was, there was nothing to fear. For their noble wish, they would simply eliminate the obstacles. In the depths of a dark cave, a cloaked old man stepped in quietly. He approached one of the scientists and asked if everything was all right, and the scientist nodded, assuring him that all was well. The old man moved closer to the edge of the platform and looked down below, commenting that the view was nice. Beneath him stretched a hidden laboratory, filled with eerie chambers containing strange, unidentifiable creatures suspended in fluid. Just then, the old man told the scientist that he was counting on him. To their surprise, a massive explosion occurred, blowing everyone away. The old man frantically asked what it was, but his question was only met with more explosions. The chambers had shattered, sending the scientists flying from the impact. Some of them even had their limbs severed and their bodies torn in half. From the smoke and carnage emerged the culprit, Reyna. The old man recognized her as the vampire noble's daughter. He couldn't believe it, and he started to worry that Arga had come for him. True enough, Arga came forward, jokingly saying that he had become quite famous. He didn't think that a suspicious old geezer would know his name. Behind him, Sissel followed with a bright smile, happily saying that Arga made it big. The old man was pissed, and he asked Arga how he found the place. Arga replied that a kind vampire noble had given him a hint, and he had come to avenge him. On top of that, Arga thought he'd ask about various things while he was at it, like the old man's objectives. Desperate, the old man suddenly called out to the scientists below, commanding them to release the magic beasts. The scientists quickly jumped into action, urging the magical beasts to come out and devour the intruders. Just then, one of the cages was opened, and out came a two-headed monster. It roared in fury as it rushed forward, even killing some of the scientists in the process. That monster came out like IDK who the enemy is, but everyone's dying. As the beast headed toward Arga, the old man thought he was at a disadvantage alone. This was the perfect opportunity for him to escape while Arga and the others fought those abominations. However, before he could even act on his plans, the two-headed monster's heads were severed in an instant. Reyna had killed it, shocking the old man. He was stunned by her destructive power, as he didn't know that the vampire noble's daughter had such strength. This made him wonder if it was an enhancement through fusion techniques. Arga mocked the old man for investigating his abilities, though he hadn't even used fusion. This was Reyna's inherent power. Her latent abilities were drawn out by the anger of her father being driven mad. Suddenly, Arga told the old man to explain what he did to Reyna's father. The old man took a deep breath, cursing Arga and the others for their insolent behavior. Just then he banged his staff on the ground, claiming that he would make these impudent brats regret what they had done. However, he didn't get to do anything, as Reyna had already cut off his head. His lifeless body crashed down the stairs, smeared with his blood. She gave him a buzz cut from the shoulders down. Arga was unimpressed by what Reyna had done, as she had already killed the man before they got any information. Reyna reasoned that the old man made a suspicious move, so she had to do it. However, she revealed that she didn't kill him. She prolonged his life with blood magic, and his head could still talk. The old man was furious, wondering how Reyna dared to do that to him. Sissel was impressed, as the old man could talk for a while now. She was determined to use their time wisely. Sissel kneeled down to meet the severed head's gaze, asking if they dreamed of reviving the evil god she had defeated. The man scoffed at the fact that Sissel used the term dream. as he thought she was spewing out nonsense. The revival of the Lord Evil God was not a dream, but a reality. It was imminent, and they had been working towards that. The old man went on to reveal that they had collected the little remaining blood of Lord Evil God and implanted it in various organisms. It was an experiment to understand the effects of the god's revival. This made Reyna furious, as her father had been sacrificed for something like that. However, the old man argued that it was not just a sacrifice, he was meant to be a noble sacrifice. The old man let out an evil laugh, saying that all test subjects would become nourishment for Lord Evil God. He added that they would offer the amplified power of Lord Evil God within the test subjects, along with their flesh and blood. Just then, the old man asked Sissel what would happen next, especially since she had once killed their god. He went on to say that their god would be reborn with far greater power than when she first defeated him. Sissel only remained quiet, though her once curious look had now turned serious. The old man then told Reyna that her father was unfortunate. If he had grown as planned, he would have eventually been collected and offered to Lord Evil God. That would have been a true honor. Reyna furiously called the old man a bastard, but before she could do anything, Arga intervened. He told the old man that he was quite talkative. He admitted that it was annoying, but it sure helped. The old man wasn't worried because even if Arga knew, he could do nothing to stop their god's resurrection. Arga asked if that was so, and the old man replied that it was impossible because they would all die inside the cave. Suddenly, a huge wave started to form behind them. Sissel noticed that the old man was absorbing monsters and human corpses, and he was gathering the flesh and blood around to become one. However, she commented that it was desperate magic. The old man felt bad for everyone, as he had activated it before they decapitated him. Everything there would become one mass of flesh as nourishment for Lord Evil God, including Arga, Reyna, and Sissel. However, despite the old man's threat, Arga remained calm, staring at the wave of corpses like it was nothing. He smirked, knowing that they wouldn't be caught by something so slow. Just then, Arga kicked the old man's severed head, sending it toward the massive wave. Man used kick as his final send-off email. Arga was quick to realize that the old man was talking to buy time for that thing to expand. Considering that, they could no longer expect any more information. Arga promptly headed to the exit, telling Lala to burn everything as he left. The old man cursed at Arga, and he soon met his inevitable end. A massive explosion occurred, and the old man screamed as he melted into the flames. Lala's power was so strong that it managed to create a hole in the ground above it. As Reyna saw all of this unfold, she remarked that she wanted to kill the old man herself. Arga apologized for it, but he believed that there were still others to avenge. Sissel suddenly sighed, wondering why they wanted to revive the evil god when she went through the trouble of defeating it. She complained that it was a pain, so Arga insisted on handling the evil god. Sissel was surprised, and she asked if he was sure. At the back of Arga's mind, he thought that if he could defeat it, he would be closer to Sissel. He couldn't believe that he was about to fight the evil god. He had truly come that far. Arga, who was at the bottom, was about to have the fight of his life. Could Arga and his companions truly defeat the evil god? Somewhere on the outskirts of town, Sans handed Kanado a bowl of crushed herbs, letting him know the mixture was ready. Kanado winced as he began to apply it, the sting spreading sharply across his wounds. Sans reminded him that the herbs needed to take effect quickly if he wanted to heal, and that they would have to spend yet another night outside. The rough ground was hard to bear, especially with those wounds. They did Arga so dirty the plot gave them a camping arc. Kanado muttered his frustration under his breath, wishing they had a proper healer, or at least enough money to afford an inn. But Sans knew the truth all too well. The only one capable of healing them remained petrified, and even if they wanted to earn money, the guild's ban left them powerless. They would just get beaten again and incur more injuries. As the bitterness welled up, Kanado's anger boiled over. He couldn't understand how long they would continue to be treated as villains, when, in his mind, the real monsters were those who persecuted them. He blamed Arga for everything, thinking that he ruined their lives. To Kanado, it was Arga's fault. Just then, a passerby happened to hear their conversation, and she asked if they were injured. Before anyone could react, a snake-like monster lunged out of nowhere and sank its fangs into Kanado's arm. Panic erupted instantly. Sans screamed, and Kanado staggered back, clutching his wound in shock. Despite the dire situation, the passerby told them to stay still. To Kanado's shock, the wound on his arm was healed in an instant. The passerby retrieved the monster-like snake, then she volunteered to heal Kanado and Sans, seeing that they were both covered in wounds. Kanado, still reeling from what had just happened, could only stare in disbelief as he tried to comprehend who this mysterious woman was. Elsewhere, Arga and Reyna sat down for some tea. Reyna kept smiling, so Arga remarked that she seemed to be in a good mood. Reyna thought it was only natural as she was on a date with him. This confused Arga, so he asked when that ever happened. Offended, Reina made it clear that they were having it at the moment. It was just the two of them, so it must be a date. Arga remained nonchalant, explaining that it was just a short break before they fought the evil god. He told Reina to rest too, but she only told him not to kill the romantic mood. Arga trying to save the world, Reina trying to save the moment. Now that Arga had mentioned it, Reina thought about the evil god. She didn't know much about it and wondered what exactly an evil god was. Arga didn't know much about them either. They said evil gods came from space, and depending on how they grew, they had the potential to destroy planets. That was what they said anyway. If something that dangerous was reviving, they had to defeat it. Suddenly, Reina apologized to Arga because avenging her father had turned into such a big deal. However, Arga told her not to apologize. Thanks to her, they learned about the evil god's revival. On top of that, it worked out well for him too. He asked Reina if she knew how many people had defeated an evil god. In this world, only 2 people had ever achieved that feat. One was Cecil, and the other was Lukumi Milk Tea. That name sounds like they got defeated by lactose intolerance. Reina was struck by curiosity, so Arga went on to explain that Lukumi was a tamer like him. She was the first and strongest S-rank tamer in history, and she was the goal for all tamers, including Arga. If Arga got to defeat an evil god, he would be on par with those two. He would even be closer to being the strongest. Meeting Reina gave him that chance, which was why he was grateful. Reina suddenly thought about Lukumi and wondered what kind of person she was. Arga had never seen her, and even Cecil said that she had never met her. There were rumors that she went searching for the legendary monster Balzard, but they were just rumors, and no one really knew. Hearing that, Reina thought that Lukumi was quite mysterious. Still, Arga was hopeful that if they kept getting stronger, they might meet her someday, just like how they met Cecil. Now that Arga had mentioned it, Reina noticed that Cecil hadn't come back yet. Arga thought it was still too early and told Reina to wait leisurely for her souvenirs. Unbeknownst to them, a hooded man was observing them from afar with his binoculars. The strongest woman in humanity was out shopping and her comrades were having tea. Knowing that made the man think they were being too carefree. However, this made him smile, as it would mean winning. They could now buy time for the Lord Evil God's revival. He was convinced that Arga and the others didn't know his lord's location yet, but they would find it eventually. They would move the Lord Evil God away while they rested so that they couldn't reach him before his revival. Once he revived, victory would be theirs. Then, to the man's shock, he noticed that Arga was looking right back at him through his binoculars. He panicked, thinking that Arga had noticed him. Meanwhile, Arga told Reina that Cecil had returned, as he could sense Lulu's aura from afar. As the man wondered what they were talking about, he suddenly noticed that someone was behind him. To his horror, it was Cecil, casually carrying Lulu in her arms. He really thought he was the main character until the camera panned. She said hi to the man while he anxiously asked why she was there. Cecil replied that it was so easy to spot evil god cult members because they smelled like evil god blood. The man seemed confused, so Cecil asked Lulu if she could smell it too, since she was also from the evil god's lineage. To the man's surprise, smoke was emerging from the fields below, shocking him. He couldn't believe it, but Cecil said it loud and clear. They had destroyed all their remaining research facilities, and they searched for them using their ability to smell evil gods. They struck them so quickly that the man didn't even notice. Just then, Cecil told the man that she rarely got angry, but she wasn't going to let him revive an evil god. Now she wondered what she should do with the man, who was carelessly watching without noticing her movements. She thought about letting Reina decide. Just then, the man threw a bomb at Cecil, but she only stared at it as it hurled toward her. She stared at the bomb like it was a fly in her drink. As the bomb exploded, the man cursed at how unexpected the situation was. He was anxious, knowing that he had to retreat and regroup. However, before he could leave, he found Cecil staring right at him. He screamed in horror, and then his face met the solid ground. Cecil smashed him down with immense force, telling him that his expectations were really naive. He was stupid for thinking that he could escape from her like that. Just then, Arga and Reina approached Cecil. Arga commented that she was quick and she waved at him, saying that she was back. Suddenly, she told him that she had found where the evil god was. Elsewhere, Sans was overjoyed because his injuries had healed. Kanado was just as happy, and he told the woman that she had saved them. Just then, the woman said that the more she heard, the worse it sounded. She suddenly mentioned Arga and how he drove his former comrades to this state. Kanado quickly said that she was right. Arga was terrible. Sans was also relieved, as the woman seemed to understand them. Just then, the woman said that if they wanted revenge, she would help them. Kanado was surprised, so the woman explained that she was a tamer too, and as a fellow tamer, she couldn't forgive someone like Arga. She could use fusion techniques too, and she would make Kanado stronger through fusion. Shocked, Kanado asked the woman who she was. She was quick to reply, introducing herself as Lukumi Milk Tea. However, one couldn't help but wonder, what was the true goal of Lukumi, the strongest tamer in history? Arga, Reyna, and Cecil arrived at a massive stone fortress built within a canyon, the first labyrinth. Reyna remarked in awe and caution, realizing that this was the labyrinth said to conceal the evil god. Cecil was pretty sure that was it, as she had heard from multiple cult members whose stories had been corroborated. Arga was impressed that the cult had thought it through, seeing how they hid it in a high-difficulty S-rank labyrinth. Not many people went there, so it was less likely to be found. As they went down the winding staircase, Cecil apologized in advance in case it turned out to be false information. Still, Arga thought it was fine either way. Suddenly, a massive, ferocious beast lunged at Arga. The tension spiked for a split second, then the monster collapsed, slain almost effortlessly. As the chaos settled, a treasure chest tumbled down the stone steps. Arga grabbed it, saying that even if that was the case, there were still plenty of rare items to be found in the labyrinth. The group continued exploring the labyrinth's winding corridors until they came across a fork in the path. Cecil suggested splitting up, and she took it upon herself to choose a path. If it turned out to be a dead end, she would come back and follow Arga's path. Arga agreed and said they would do the same. Reyna was worried, and she asked Cecil if she would be okay on her own. Arga was puzzled by what Reyna said, so she explained that the cult members might be up to something. Arga reassured her that there was no need to worry, as it was Cecil they were talking about. However, he admitted Reyna was right. There might be traps ahead, so they should proceed with caution. Just then, Reyna gasped loudly, prompting Arga to ask what was wrong. It turned out that she had just realized they were about to be alone together. This could almost be called a date, and she felt touched by the thought that Cecil must have left them alone for their sake, not her turning a tactical mission into a Wattpad moment. Annoyed, Arga spoke in a serious tone, telling her to get back in the shadows. Horrified, Reyna quickly apologized and promised not to say anything more. Meanwhile, Cecil was met with a dead end, and she thought that way was a bust. Just then, she suddenly sensed a bunch of monsters coming her way. Her eyes narrowed, knowing these weren't ordinary ones. Even from afar, she could smell the evil god's blood. As she turned around, she was suddenly met by a horrifying sight. Two grotesque, humanoid creatures with long, tangled hair and twisted faces emerged from the shadows. Cecil noticed that one of the monsters had glasses, leading her to speculate that he was one of the survivors from the evil god cult's research team. It looked like he managed to survive, only to have the evil god's blood put in him. The real horror is that he chose those frames. Just then, the monster spoke to Cecil, asking her how she dared to kill his comrades. Annoyed, Cecil replied that they were the bad ones for trying to destroy the world. This enraged the monsters, causing them to stretch out their long limbs to attack Cecil. As expected of humanity's strongest, Cecil cut off the monster's arms, and she barely even took out her sword. Without wasting a second, she decapitated their heads as well. Blood spewed from the monsters' necks, sending their heads crashing into the solid ground. To Cecil's surprise, one of the heads suddenly muttered "One Re," which summoned a magical sigil to appear. Just then, the heads melted into the sigil before disappearing into thin air. Cecil was puzzled, wondering what had just happened. In another part of the labyrinth, Arga was sure that there was a route to the evil god's chambers somewhere. He told Reyna to proceed carefully, and she agreed with him. Just then, someone spoke to Arga, excited that he had come. To Arga's surprise, it was none other than Kanado, smiling at him innocently. Annoyed, Reyna recalled that Kanado was the one who exiled Arga. Arga asked Kanado why he was there, and he replied that he had heard Arga was going there, so they had been waiting. Arga asked what the purpose was, but Kanado only said that he should know by now. With a nonchalant expression, Kanado revealed that it was to kill Arga, whom he hated. Suddenly, Reyna volunteered to handle the situation, knowing that Kanado was their enemy. However, Arga told her to wait, as he had noticed that something was off. Kanado was demoted to E rank and shouldn't have been able to enter an SSS rank labyrinth. Even if he got in, he shouldn't have made it that far with his abilities. Sans wasn't with him either, and yet, he still looked so calm. In Arga's mind, a lot of things didn't add up. Reyna remarked that Kanado looked weak and there was no need to be cautious. Still, Arga said no. He wanted to see what Kanado would do first. Reyna seethed with anger, so she defied Arga's advice and dashed forward to attack. She didn't want their alone time to be interrupted any longer. Arga tried to stop her, but Reyna didn't listen. She prepared her fist, ready to hit Kanado with all her might. Reyna managed to hit Kanado on her first attempt, making her beam with pride. She smirked, confirming that it was nothing, just as she had thought. Then, to her shock, Kanado swung his fist right back at her, sending her flying before she could even react. She crashed into the wall near Arga, causing him to call out to her in concern. She got humbled so fast she unlocked character development. Kanado chuckled, mockingly asking Arga if he was keeping a monster that didn't follow orders. Before Arga could react, a grotesque transformation began to unfold. Another pair of arms burst from Kanado's back, twisting his body into something monstrous and unnatural. Kanado remarked that Arga was still a crappy tamer, but Arga was too horrified by Kanado's disfigured body to say anything. Then a voice echoed from within the abomination, asking Arga if the monster was called Reina. The sound sent a chill down Arga's spine. It was Sans. Her body grotesquely fused into Kanado's back. She then questioned whether the monster called Reina was as foolish as the one Arga had once tamed before. As Arga was stunned to see Sans, Kanado laughed at him, asking what was wrong. He was so amused that Arga's face was twisted up upon seeing them. Arga's like, "Damn bro, you need a chiropractor and an exorcist." Suddenly, Sans told Kanado that she would punish Reina in Arga's place. Kanado smiled, telling Sans to go ahead and do that. Kanado and Sans bolted toward Reina's unconscious body, screaming for her to obey her master's orders. However, before they could land a punch, Arga attacked them with a forceful kick, sending them hurling into a wall. Arga quickly ran to Reina, urging her to open her eyes. Meanwhile, Kanado and Sans emerged from the rubble, laughing because it didn't hurt them at all. If anything, they believed they had gotten stronger. Arga suspected that the cult did something to them, but they had no idea what Arga was talking about. They then went on to share that the one who made them that way was a Tamer, which shocked Arga. Kanado continued, saying that it was a legendary Tamer, stronger and more capable than Arga, Lukumi Milk Tea. Arga froze, his mind reeling in disbelief. Faced with Kanado's monstrous form, Arga was torn about what to do next. Back at the guild, the attendant proudly announced that she saw an amazing person, Lukumi. She told Namira that she saw her at the edge of town, prompting him to ask if she was referring to the SSS rank Tamer. The adventurers remarked that no one had seen Lukumi in years, and they wondered if the attendant had seen someone else. The attendant was sure that it was definitely her, as she knew her personally. When she was a troublemaker, she lost to Lukumi, so there was no way she was mistaken. She got humbled so bad she joined customer service. The adventurers were amused to know that the attendant was once a troublemaker, and they asked what made her so unruly. However, the attendant quickly got embarrassed and told the adventurers not to focus on that. Just then, one of the adventurers remembered something, so Namira asked what it was. The adventurer claimed that Kanato and the others told him that Lukumi was with them, and that she would make them stronger so they could get their revenge on Arga. Kanato even taunted the adventurer, saying that he would be next. The other adventurers were surprised that Kanato and Lukumi teamed up, and they couldn't believe it. This didn't make sense to the attendant, as Lukumi was alone when she saw her. One of the adventurers asked how Lukumi could make Kanato and Sans stronger, but none of them had the answer. Meanwhile, Namira pondered the situation. Lukumi, who preferred to act alone, was teaming up with inferiors. This made him question what her purpose was. In the labyrinth, Arga continued to face Kanato and Sans, while Reina remained unconscious. Arga asked if Kanato had truly mentioned Lukumi, and he confirmed it, reminding him that she could also perform fusion. They had become stronger through fusion, and they had been reborn. Kanato and Sans were amused by the look of surprise and unease on Arga's face, and they thought it was a nice expression. Just then, Kanato changed his stance and darted toward Arga. He and Sans wanted Arga to look at their power and show them more of his surprised face. Kanato threw a devastating punch while Sans's twisted glee fueled their attack. Arga barely evaded the first strike, but their teamwork was relentless. He eventually received multiple attacks from Kanato and Sans, and all he could do was take cover. He was forced to retreat, but when the opportunity came, he kicked a rock straight into Kanato's eye. Arga really said, "You can't spell projectile without petty." Blood spewed from Kanato's eye, and he fell silent for a moment. Arga remained quiet, waiting to see what the duo's next move would be. Suddenly, Kanato laughed, mockingly asking Arga if he thought he got him. His eye, which had previously been injured, had now regenerated. Kanato proudly announced that any of his wounds would regenerate, all thanks to Lukumi. Through fusion with various monsters, they had become bodies that wouldn't lose to Arga. He asked Arga how it felt and wondered if he felt fear or despair. Arga, with a cold tone, said that he felt neither fear nor despair at Kanato's power. What he feared was his hopelessly idiotic nature. Kanato was taken aback, but Arga continued. He mentioned Lukumi, then asked Kanato if he thought their meeting was a coincidence or fate. It was all fake. It was clearly someone from the evil god cult, and for whatever reason they approached Kanato to use him. If they said evil god cult, even idiots like Kanato would be cautious, so they impersonated a famous warrior to gain his trust. What Kanato fused with was probably an evil god-type monster, and the evil god's blood was likely mixed in too. Soon enough, he would lose his human form. True enough, Kanato's arm began to distort and melt grotesquely, tendrils writhing out of his flesh. As his arm grew, the sound of agonizing pain escaped from his throat. As Kanato was trapped in his suffering, Arga mercilessly observed him. Kanato was always blaming others and always looked down on them. He conveniently clung to others, and he was only brave with words. This was the end for such beings like him. Not just their hearts, but their bodies had become ugly too. Kanato and Sans, once human, had twisted into a grotesque monstrous form, their bodies stretched and warped. Furious, Kanado charged toward Arga, his fist ready to land an attack. Even as the abomination lunged, Arga's cold composure didn't break. He admitted that Kanado had certainly gotten a bit stronger. However, trash was still trash, even if the quality improved. Arga suddenly unleashed a powerful kick, sending Kanado and Sans crashing into the solid ground. Arga was now furious as he had to settle things with Kanado in that form. Arga drew his dagger in one swift motion and lunged forward, slicing through the grotesque limbs of Kanado and Sans. As Arga skillfully tore through their bodies, their screams echoed through the battlefield, raw and piercing. Arga out here playing Fruit Ninja, but the fruit screams. In a final, desperate act, Sans cried out Arga's name, her rage driving her to strike back. But before she could retaliate, his blade met her once more. The cut was swift. Her torso and arms were severed in an instant, and her mangled body fell to the ground. Kanado, however, clung stubbornly to life. He refused to accept defeat, convinced that his body would soon regenerate. But Arga, anticipating his persistence, summoned Lulu to his side. At his command, the creature unleashed her skill. Crushed Hope. A wave of invisible force rippled through the air, slicing through Kanado's torso. He scoffed at first, certain that even a wound like that would heal. Yet as moments passed, the truth set in. His body remained torn, his flesh refusing to mend. Lulu hit him with that no refund, no respawn policy. Arga bluntly explained that Lulu was an evil god-type monster, and the waves from her attack inhibited evil god-type regeneration. Reina's father also had regenerative abilities, but while under Lulu's mental attack, his regeneration stopped. Arga noticed this characteristic back then and he made sure to make use of it now. Kanado screamed, sensing that his body was crumbling. Suddenly, Sans's voice tore through the air, screaming Arga's name. Though her limbs and body were severed, she lunged from the ground, furiously announcing that she would kill him. Nah, why she moved like a possessed display at H&M. However, before she could do anything, Reina suddenly called out to her. She had now regained consciousness, and this time she would avenge herself. Using her powers, Reina aimed sharp weapons toward Sans, making her gasp in fear. With a sinister grin, Reina told Sans that she really did it earlier. In a blinding flash, countless weapons pierced through Sans's pathetic body, killing her in an instant. She crashed onto Kanado's crumbling body and he screamed in horror. He cursed, wondering what it would have been like if Arga weren't there. This surprised Arga, but before he could ask more questions, Kanado and Sans's bodies disappeared into a magical sigil. Cecil suddenly came running toward Arga, calling out his name. However, she was too late, as Kanado and Sans had already vanished. As the dust settled, Cecil recalled that it was the same as before. Arga asked what happened, but Cecil couldn't quite make sense of it. Someone suddenly answered that everything was for the evil god. It was Lukumi, or rather, the fake one. Arga quickly recognized that it was the fake Lukumi, and he asked why she used Kanado and the others. They weren't even useful in battle. He really hit them with a performance review after death. Lukumi's impersonator simply replied that it was because those two hated him. The more hatred they absorbed, the more powerful the evil god would become. They were nothing but nutrients to the evil god. Cecil concluded that Lukumi's impersonator had pitted Kanado and the others who hated Arga, which was the same case with the evil god cultists who hated her. Lukumi's impersonator confirmed that their hatred was amplified at the moment of death, becoming their best nutrition. Suddenly, the ground started to crack and Lukumi's impersonator announced that it was time for the revival of the evil god, who had gained immense power. She smiled, telling Arga to enjoy the nightmare. Arga remained silent, preparing himself for the form the evil god would take. The ground rumbled violently as an earthquake rippled through the town, sending waves of panic across the streets. Meanwhile, the labyrinth started collapsing, so Arga and the others reminded themselves to be careful. Lukumi's impersonator remarked that it was a pleasant sound. It was the sound announcing the rebirth of the evil god and the end of the world. Pissed, Arga asked why they even wanted to destroy the world. Lukumi's impersonator answered that she didn't want to destroy the world, rather it was world reformation. Surely Arga had noticed it too. The ugliness of the world. The nobles' misrule, the oppressed commoners. If one was born with low status, one could never rise up in their lifetime. They were nothing but slaves. They had a rotten class society, so Lukumi's impersonator planned to return that rotten world to nothingness. She would do that with the power of the evil god. Arga argued that she would end up killing the poor commoners too, which was such a foolish move. Lukumi's impersonator thought that Arga wouldn't understand. The wonder of everyone dying equally and being reborn equally excited her. Suddenly, something roared from below them, making Arga wonder if it was the evil god. A massive centipede-like monster with enormous tentacles emerged from the rubble, making its way up to the surface. Bro, that's not an evil god, that's a bug that missed pest control day. It let out a piercing scream, seemingly threatened by Arga and the others. Arga called out to Sissel and she agreed that she would leave it to him while she stood by. Arga charged forward with Reyna and told her to attack while searching for the evil god's abilities. Lukumi's impersonator laughed, thinking that Arga should have run away and had his last supper. Back at the guild, the attendant wondered if the earthquake was over. On the town streets, the people were convinced it was an earthquake, and it was so strong that they could barely stand. Some wondered if a volcano had erupted, but others argued that the rumbling came from a different direction than the mountain. An old man was asked which direction the rumbling came from, and he replied that it was from the western plains, where the first labyrinth resided. At that moment, a hooded individual passing through the crowd froze, their attention caught by the name. Meanwhile, Reyna unleashed a relentless storm of spear-like projectiles aimed at the evil god. But to her shock, the spears didn't even reach it as they disappeared in a snap. Arga, refusing to yield, charged forward and drove his blade into the creature's limbs, severing them in a single, furious motion. But his triumph was short-lived as the wounds regenerated instantly. Reyna's attack seemed to disappear because the creature healed too quickly. It was regenerating the instant it was struck. Reyna asked what they should do, and Arga replied that it would be nothing special, they just needed to keep attacking. There was no such thing as infinite regeneration. If it kept taking damage, it would reach its limit. They might even find a weakness along the way. Suddenly, Sissel called out to Arga, reminding him to watch out for counterattacks. The evil god released a fluid-like substance from its mouth, aiming it at Arga and Reyna. Fortunately, they were quick enough to dodge the attack. Arga was pissed at himself for letting his guard down just because the creature barely moved. Concerned, he told Reyna not to touch the liquid because it might be dangerous. Suddenly, Reyna alerted Arga to look above him. The evil god hovered above him, ready to strike. Arga quickly grew nervous, realizing he had been too careless. The evil god's massive body crashed to the ground, causing Sissel and Reyna to call out to Arga. Evil god out here doing WWE moves with divine confidence. Lukumi's impersonator taunted Sissel, saying now wasn't the time to worry, as she would be next. Just like the all-talk man Arga, Lukumi's impersonator was convinced that Sissel would die pathetically and easily, powerless before the evil god. Meanwhile, Sissel remained quiet, allowing Lukumi's impersonator to ramble on. She told Sissel that she could run if she wanted, though she would die anyway if she did. Just then, Sissel's eyes widened in shock when she saw something unexpected. Even Lukumi's impersonator was stunned. Below them, Arga lifted the evil god into the air, complaining that it stank. Lukumi's impersonator was in utter shock while Reyna was relieved. Arga announced that from then on, he wouldn't let his guard down. He then hurled the evil god into a wall, making it cough up blood. Suddenly, Arga remarked that he could do something about the smell. He really said, "Ew, you stink," and committed divine homicide. He called out to Lukumi's impersonator, addressing her as a sister of the evil god cult. He told her to prepare herself for despair, but she retorted that it was too early to celebrate. Lukumi's impersonator suddenly lunged into the air, which shocked Arga. To his surprise, she aimed for the evil god's mouth. Arga was like, "Prepare for despair," and she said, "Say less." She had already told him that feelings of resentment were the evil god's nourishment, and by absorbing that, it would become even more powerful. The evil god crushed Lukumi's impersonator in its massive jaw. As she suffered, she furiously screamed that she hated the world and hated all of them. If she could destroy them all, she would gladly give her body. After devouring Lukumi's impersonator, the evil god unleashed a roar so thunderous it shook the very foundations of the labyrinth. The sound ripped through the air, making Arga and the others panic. Its eyes, burning with pure evil, locked onto Arga and Reyna below. Sensing the growing danger, Sissel urgently warned them to run away. But before they could move, a blinding surge of energy erupted from the creature. The explosion that followed was so powerful it seemed like a nuclear blast. Arga shielded Reyna as the shockwave tore across the terrain, while Sissel clung desperately to a nearby rock to avoid being swept away. Massive damage was inflicted on the first labyrinth, proving just how powerful the evil god was. Arga was blown away by its incredible firepower, while Reyna checked on him in concern. When the dust began to settle, the evil god stood amidst the wreckage, so Reyna urgently alerted Arga that it was about to fire again. Yet Arga met the creature's gaze with a faint, knowing smirk as if he had a secret plan. That smirk says, "I read ahead in the script.